Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. And listen, I'm going to tell you where I'm going to be on Saturday, and it's going to be at the Minot Public Library. They have organized, I shouldn't say this. Some volunteers at the library have organized an event at the library to protest a couple of bills before the legislature. We're talking about House Bill 1205, introduced by House Majority Leader Mike LaFleur, Republican from Dickinson, as well as Senate Bill 2360. I got that right. I didn't say 2306, as I've been wanting to write all the entire time I've been talking about this bill. It's Senate Bill 2360, introduced by Senator Keith Boehm of Mandan, although one of the co-sponsors, notable co-sponsors, is Senate Majority Leader David Hogue, Republican from Minot. These two bills are what I would describe as censorship bills. Ostensibly, the supporters would say that they're trying to protect people from, and children in particular, protect them from pornography or content that they shouldn't be accessing. And the problem is that it applies, the bills apply not just to children but to adults. And also they apply not just Senate Bill 2360 specifically, applies not just to public institutions like school libraries or public libraries, but even private retailers like Barnes & Noble or Walmart or Target. These bills are bad news. We'll get that right out of the bat. Here to talk with me about that, of course, my co-host, Ben Hansen, but also Janet Anderson. She is the library director for the Minot Public Library, and also Cody Schuler, who's the advocacy manager for the ACLU. Cody, Janet, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Cody, first of all, tell me about these bills from the perspective of your organization, which obviously, I mean, anytime we're talking about the ACLU is looking at this from a legal perspective. You guys are the lawyer group. You file suits. That's how you go about the bulk of your advocacy. So I guess you're looking at it from that perspective. What are you guys seeing in these bills?
Well, I mean, they're violations of the First Amendment. So I'm not an attorney myself as an advocacy manager, but I can tell you that we already have things like the Miller test. We already have established Supreme Court precedent to be able to name obscenity, pornography, and all these things. And here we are trying to narrow those definitions, trying to put this upon, as you said, retailers, on libraries, on schools, and just taking it too far.
Cody, can we back up a little bit? For both you and Janet, you mentioned the Miller test. I wanted to see if you could kind of describe to listeners what that was. And then the ACLU is a nationally known brand, but maybe it's not known. I think there might be some listeners that are maybe even a little surprised it's in North Dakota. Before we even jump too hard in this bill, could you kind of describe what the ACLU does in North Dakota? Is it just, I mean, from what you described, is it simply lawsuits, or what all are you doing here?
Oh, yeah. So the ACLU of North Dakota, we have an advocacy department and a legal department. And so, the ACLU is oftentimes really known for, we'll see you in court kind of things, to be able to establish, cases of impact. And so we do have that with our legal department. But the ACLU was really founded in 1920 as an advocacy organization. And in recent years, we've really strengthened our advocacy work across the country. And here in North Dakota, that means that we're doing everything from community organizing to lobbying in the legislature.
And so what did you mean by the Miller test when you said that?
So Miller v. California, 1973 case, it actually laid out a three-pronged test for looking at obscenity specifically. I always get it wrong whenever I try to remember all three prongs because it's not a part of my daily work, so I always have to go back and look it up. But Janet, as a librarian, not to put you on the spot, I'm guessing that Janet probably has maybe a little better understanding of it. But essentially, the three-prong test is really looking at, if the average person applies, those contemporary community standards, that when looking at something taken as the whole, appears to, whether it's obscene or not, right? To be able to look at it from that perspective. Janet, am I getting that right?
Yeah, you are. So it is, like Cody said, it's a three-pronged measurement, and it's actually already mostly in the Dakota Century Code. So this is already covered, but it is whether the average person would find the work taken as a whole applies to prurient interests, whether the work describes or in an offensive manner sexual conduct that would be specifically defined by law, and then whether the work lacks any serious literacy or artistic or scientific value. And it has to be all three of those. And again, it has to be taken as a whole. So we already have that on a national level, and the North Dakota Century Code already has that in law. So a lot of these bills are just expanding on that.
One of the reasons I brought up, obviously the ACLU and their lawyerly habits. I brought it up because I think it's an important consideration with this bill. If these bills pass, one or the other, or both, I guess, although I have a feeling if they are going to pass, they're probably going to be molded into one. That's usually how it goes. But regardless, if something like this passes out of our legislature, the state's going to get sued. I don't know if the ACLU specifically is going to do it. Somebody's going to do it, though. Whether it's the retailers, the likelihood that our state getting sued, and that's going to cost us money. We're going to be spending a not insignificant amount of tax dollars defending this, which I think brings me to my question for Janet, which is the fact that these bills were introduced is based on the presumption that there's a problem. Now, I'm very familiar with our library in Minot. I love our Minot library. We go to events there. We've checked out board games. We've checked out books, obviously. We check out video games. It's not unusual to see my family on a Saturday hanging out at the library. We like going there. And I don't perceive that there's a problem. I'm not that worried about the content that's on the shelves. My kids are down in the children's library, but then they'll come up to where I'm hanging out up in the grown-up section upstairs, and I'm not worried. Like I don't have any concerns about the content in the library. And if I see them pulling down a book that I think's maybe a little bit advanced for them, I'm there as their dad to say, well, maybe we'll wait a few years on that one. I don't perceive that there's a problem, Janet. And one of the things you were telling me before we started recording is that the Minot Public Library, you just held a public meeting talking about how you navigate some of this stuff, the process for selecting the materials in the library. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think one thing we need to illustrate here is where is the problem that these bills are trying to solve? So can you talk about that a little bit, Janet?
Absolutely. I mean, the short answer is there's not a problem. I have specifically said to people, I challenge you to find anything in our library that is pornography. And if you do, bring it to me and let's talk about what you think it is and why you think it is. So last night we held a program open to the public called The Book Goes Where, and I invited all of our local legislators, city council, my library board, as well as the public. And we had over 40 people come. We talked about, it was kind of boring. It was all about policies and procedures. It was, how do we decide who's ordering what books for where? What resources do we use when we're looking at those? Whose eyes see those orders all the way through the process? And what do we do when there's conflicting information about like what age level something should be? One thing that was brought up that was really interesting, because this is something we've been hearing, is that people seem to be under this impression that the American Library Association, which is our professional national association, is telling us what to order. nowhere in that process are we getting information from the ALA. We do use the ALA established intellectual freedom and statement of freedom to read. We use those as guidelines, but we are not taking information from the American Library Association. We're taking it from journals and patron input and peer reviews. So that is something that is very interesting, that not many people have asked us about this. And some of the bills even say a library must do this. And as librarians, tell them, but we already do. We already do. Like, why did you ask us first? We are happy to share that.
Janet, how long have you worked for? Are you at the Minot Public Library? I'm sorry. How long have you worked at the Minot Public Library?
10 years.
I'm sorry. How many?
10.
10 years. How many times in 10 years would you say that either parents or others, concerned citizens, have come in addressing books like the ones these bills purport to want to remove from your libraries?
So it's a really good question. There might be two answers to it. First of all, we have a formal process. I would be willing to bet money that every single library has this process and this same form. It's called a request for reconsideration. So if somebody comes in and complains about a book, saying they want it withdrawn or they want it moved, our staff are trained to offer them this tool, a request for reconsideration. A lot of times the conversation stops there, because part of that is they have to fill out the form, but they have to read the book as a whole. So I can't tell you how much time it stops there. But I can tell you that I've been library director for 8 years, and I've only had 4 requests for reconsideration.
Did those requests go through?
In 3 cases, I opted to make no changes to the items that were being challenged. In 1 case, we did move a series of books from the teen section to the adult section.
So, in other words, the system's in place and it was used and then it worked. Okay,
right.
Got it.
I think what we're hearing is that when I tell them, no, I'm not doing anything, people think it's broken.
One of the problems in this, and I think Cody could probably speak to this if we're talking about the history of jurisprudence around obscenity and everything, is a lot of this is in the eye of the beholder. In fact, there's actually a famous quote from, and I'm going to paraphrase here, probably butcher it, but there's a famous quote from a Supreme Court justice who says, "I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it." That speaks to, I mean, we could say, well, is something pornography or not? I don't know. I have checked out some books from the Minot Public Library that's got some pretty racy sections in them, right? And but to me, that's art. That's part of literature. And is that appropriate for everybody's children? Listen, I'm not your kids' parent. That's up to you. You figure that out. I don't want the government making that decision for me, but I mean, sex is a part of life. It's a part of literature. And I think everybody's going to have different tastes. And it becomes really, really hard to have a process that's going to satisfy everybody based on taste or based on scruples or whatever. I don't know. It's not perfect. So I think what we do is we set up a process. We do the best we can. We have that process. And the fact that it's not even being used that often, 4 times in 8 years is nothing. In one of our state's large, I realize Minot's not big by any other standard but North Dakota's, but one of our state's largest communities, 4 times in 8 years speaks to there's not a problem here. But Cody, we've talked a lot about this, and I actually had a former lawmaker email me frustration over these bills, saying everybody's talking about this in the context of libraries, everybody's talking about this in the context of schools. Nobody's pointing out that this doesn't just apply to children, and this doesn't just apply to public institutions. It applies to retailers. And Cody, that's an even bigger problem, because if we're talking about something that's paid for by the taxpayers, well, then there's a nexus where the government maybe has a little more say over content. But if we're talking about what Barnes & Noble could sell, that's a whole new frontier, Cody.
Oh, totally. And I think it's really important that you mentioned, I mean, you mentioned as far as taxpayer dollars. So from the beginning of time, right? Since ancient societies, libraries have been warehouses of knowledge, a place where we perpetuate human knowledge. We know that even during medieval Europe, that there were libraries that were in remote places that were then saved from being pillaged, and that's why we have some of the ancient knowledge today. And so, for an educated citizenry, people who go to the ballot box, people who engage in civil discourse, people who want to learn to cook, from every aspect of society, you need to be educated. And a library is a repository and a place for that. It's more than just an archive. It's a living place for the perpetuation of human knowledge. And sex, as you said, is a part of the human experience, is a part of human knowledge. Where we really, I think, get into trouble is really arguing, again, as you said, the government telling us what we can and cannot read, or what we can or cannot have access to. And also, we have an argument all the time about tax dollars. Someone might disagree with a war. I know lots of folks who were unhappy with some wars that we've been in, but yet, I can't, there's not a box on my tax form that says I can opt in or out of what I want to help pay for. And so we do need standards and regulations, but as Janet laid out, it's already there. This is unnecessary. And to extend it into the marketplace is even more egregious because, we're talking about, I hear a lot about conversations about free market capitalism and the marketplace, and now we're looking to regulate that as well. So it's not just the repositories of knowledge, it's even further. So I think that, now, I will say that this bill did originally have, or 1205 originally had a piece that said anybody who made any complaint, automatically a book needed to be removed within 30 days. That has been taken out of the bill. And let's rely a little bit, acknowledging that there are processes in place. But a few other things that made, because these bills are broad and vague. One of the things that was removed in amendment was, pictorial description or pictorial portrayals of gender identity and sexual identity. Really broad and vague. What do those actually mean? I have some ideas based on our culture wars, what was being got out there, but they were broad. I think
it also means that
those have been removed.
That episode where the Three Stooges dressed up like women would be illegal, I guess.
Exactly. And
Monty Python sketches, out of here.
Yeah. So those pieces have been removed, but also they continue to be very broad and vague as to what it, and I think during the committee's discussions, through the comments that were made on the floor, but also in committee and in testimony, sort of arguing and calling things, this is obscene, pointing at it, again, was the opinion of the lawmaker, the opinion of the person providing testimony. And I have a lot of questions as to how many of those would actually stand up in court.
And Cody, I understand your position, and Janet, you are literally working in the Library Association, and Cody, you are trying to do your due diligence and fiduciary duty to the people you represent and to the people who stay in North Dakota, aka, fancy way of saying, you have to work with these committee members to make the best bill possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why in the world it is important to acknowledge that there are processes in place, but where in the world could you come from a mentality that you could even start a bill as, I grant any finger pointer of any stripe or brand, bad faith or good, the ability to stand up, point a finger, and censor any other piece of literature or nonfiction. This doesn't apply to fiction or nonfiction. Any book available in a public library or a realtor, I find to be, I cannot imagine a justification to even start in that place. That's such a bad place to start. And I did want to address, so it's not much of a question, it's more of a statement, but I did want to address the commerce side of this. If this passes as it currently stands, governor signs it, hypothetically, if it restricts retailers from selling this broad definition of these materials, what is the online versus in-person component? Meaning, does Barnes & Noble and Fargo, is it no longer able to sell Game of Thrones, the book series, but Amazon.com is, therefore putting more of a knife into brick and mortar retailers that the market through online retailing has already done? Has that been addressed in committee?
Not that I'm aware of. That is something that I'm trying to, myself, trying to take a stand on, and I believe North Dakota League is concerned about that, as is Chambers of Commerce. It's not just so mainstream books, which is their local little bookstore here in Minot. It's not that they have to make a decision. Will I keep Game of Thrones, or will I risk getting a Class B misdemeanor?
And let's spell it out for folks that maybe aren't like fantasy fans even. Game of Thrones is a very popular best-selling book series that got turned into a TV series. I have not read the books, but I do know that there is a main plot line that involves incest. There's plenty of sexual content, sexual assault content, violence in it. If you choose not to read it.
I have read the books. Yes, they are.
And if you choose not to read them for that reason, that would make perfect sense to me. If I had a 10-year-old, I think I would probably restrict them from reading or watching the shows and watching that content. But under the course of this bill, and to Rob's point, would Game of Thrones be banned from even being checked out from a library, being contained in a library, being sold at Barnes & Noble?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know how else you read the bill. And also, I mean, talking about the online component of it, one of the services that is offered now, Janet, you can correct me because I use this all the time. You could check out ebooks, right? And that's through what's called the North Dakota Digital Consortium. And as I understand it, Janet, that's like a pool of online content that all of our state libraries share.
Yes, I believe at this point now all of North Dakota libraries are a member, and it allows for digital downloads of books, audiobooks, magazines.
Right. So that to Ben's point, I check out books all the time from the Minot Public Library. They download directly to my Kindle. Is that regulated by this? I mean, that's kind of the same online versus brick and mortar debate. I don't know. Do you guys also find it really interesting as I read through these bills that it's really super focused on sexual content, and I don't see anything like about violence in there at all? Like, and listen, I don't want these bills to pass at all. I don't want to censor any content, but we're super concerned about descriptions of sex, but not because that's the other thing Game of Thrones has is a lot of people getting killed in gruesome ways. It's such a wonderful book series. You should really read it. But I mean, there's a lot of violence in there too. And these bills don't talk about the violence at all. So if this is really about protecting children, Cody, why are we not talking about the violent content? Which again, I don't want to go down any of these roads. I don't want to censor any content, but that is so weird. It's sexual content, but we're not talking about violence.
What I'll say this, Rob, is I think it really this is another element in the culture wars. Based on the bills, these bills in their original form, especially addressing sexuality, I have to see that as a branch of the assault that we're seeing on the LGBTQ plus community in other parts of other bills in the legislature. So I just see this as one part of it. I think that it's a part of a desire by some to advocate for abstinence-only education. I've heard legislators in various pockets throughout the session talk about, one legislator referred to comprehensive sexual education should not happen until high school. And so there's a lot of ideologies, religious philosophies, et cetera, that are entering this. And so really these are culture war issues. And so we're really putting it onto this. The other piece that, Rob, I really want to bring up is the concern that I have around the mixed messages that we have around local government control, right? This is really the state telling local libraries what they can do. And I think what I found disturbing was when these amendments on 1205 actually were being offered in the House Judiciary Committee, a couple of committee members did ask questions about local control and saying this really infringes on that. And the bill sponsor, Representative LaFleur, said, I believe in local control as well. And I'm paraphrasing. He said, I believe in local control as well, except for when the local folks aren't doing their job. Then we need to step in. And so that really concerns me from a philosophical, ideological standpoint as well, that when are we going to, when are we going to decide when local control isn't, when the local authorities, local library boards, when they're not doing their jobs, when our local city commissions aren't doing their jobs? we're then that's a broader overarching conversation that's also happening around this session.
I mean, the local control argument always becomes a political football because it's. I don't. To me, there's a more important. I don't want the government censoring what I read. Period. And I don't care if it's a county commission or a municipality or a township or a school board. I don't want censorship. Now, I understand, if we're talking about a school, yeah, we don't need maybe Game of Thrones in the school library. I get that. I'm not advocating for that. But the other part of it here too, Janet, and this really frustrates me, is the way educators and librarians are kind of being cast as though there's this caste of people who are over there, twirling their mustaches, trying to get unseemly content in the hands of our children, and not members of our communities who often have children themselves, who live lives themselves, who are just trying to serve their communities, all the members of their communities, understanding that within any given community, there's going to be a lot of different viewpoints on what's good content and what's not. I don't like the way these bills have sort of, I don't know what to demonize your profession. And that's how it feels to me from the outside looking in. I thought that's so unfair.
Thank you, Rob, because actually in the past month, I would say, I've been called a groomer. I've been called a peddler of pornography. I've been misquoted as stating that I support teenagers, actually children, looking at pornography to learn about sex. And it's harmful to our career. And they don't, these people don't take time to come and talk to us and learn what we do. And I know that at one point, the legislator did say, essentially, if you aren't reading every book in your library, then maybe you shouldn't be in this job. I have 140,000 items in my library. So please pay me to sit here and read those books. I would love that.
And you're only on what, like 120,000 by now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Janet, you said you were being called groomer and a series of other untoward names. Are you comfortable sharing by whom or where this is coming from? Has a legislator accused you of this? Has someone in the community, someone's working with the sponsors of this bill, accused you of other librarians of this?
The word groomer is mostly being thrown around by non-legislators. So that's just coming from social media comments and whatnot. And rather don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but yeah, there have been two legislators in particular who've been very confrontational with our staff across the state and who have accused us of pornography peddling.
But they're accusing you. Those names, I mean, it is your prerogative, but I want those names named. I want their constituents to know what kind of representatives they have elected and what they are doing in office. They're writing laws and they're getting paid by, speaking of taxpayer dollars, and they're getting a full Cadillac healthcare package for them and their families to go about doing things like this. This is not a productive way of being a lawmaker. This is not serving your constituents. These are not good faith arguments being put forward about content for juveniles. And again, I hate that you're being put in this position. I don't mean to push you at it. And I did, Cody, you had something to say, and I did have a follow-up with you with the Republican. Cody, I wanted to ask with the Republican caucus in particular, because I do this, and I'm really going to draw a line on this one and say, sometimes I will refer to it as the legislature's doing this, the legislators are doing this. These bills are exclusively being sponsored by Republicans. So far, the votes for them have come exclusively from Republicans, unless I'm wrong, and the Democrats are a super minority at this point. But the Republican Party and many Republican politicians, when running for office, do speak about local control, small government, a light regulatory touch, and we have touched on today how this could impact local commerce, censorship, making choices on your behalf by the government. Have you had any interaction or have you seen any protests from that supposed libertarian wing of the Republican Party, things they run on when coming from this bill? I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about people in office. Yeah. Rob is saying him, I'm talking about people in office. Have you seen any of the legislators come up Republican legislators come up with those points.
Well, I will say this. First of all, if you want to name the names of as a ACLU as a nonpartisan organization, and so I'm not going to sit here and list names unless it's directly related to something I'm quoting. But I will say this: the video is all there. You and others in the public can go and watch, because many of these things have been said on the record in the House Judiciary, in the Senate Judiciary, and on the floor as well. And we can say that. I will tell you that in the conversations that I've had, there are some Republican lawmakers who are voicing concern about this and some of the other culture war bills. I feel there is sort of that libertarian conversation that's happening. However, it's not happening very loud. I'm not hearing a lot of pushback in committee or on the floor during debate. And I think that this even goes a step further beyond our elected officials into community organizations. Senator Boehm mentioned in his floor speech groups going into libraries across the state, documenting with timestamps where books are, et cetera, so that no one can pull them off the shelf and say they weren't there. And so that leads me to believe that there's other organized efforts. This isn't just the legislature taking this action, but that is, I want to be a conspiracy theorist because I loathe it, but clearly it's been stated on the record that there are citizens out there also taking these actions, and that makes me concerned for folks like Janet being able to do her job.
Well, I think Ben and I think we'll probably continue this conversation after. Maybe it's a better one for us to have, but I think that's part of it, where Ben said a moment ago that these lawmakers are getting all this money and they're getting paid to do this to us. I think we can't leave out, there is a not insignificant portion of the public that wants this. That's a reality that I think is very hard to deal with. It's hard to admit, but there are people out there. Some of these lawmakers campaigned on stuff like this, and now they're following through on their campaign promises. And I don't know. I mean, I haven't polled the public. I don't know that there's an election outcome that we could specifically point to, but there is a constituency for this. I don't know how large it is, but there is a constituency for this, and it's unfortunate.
I would agree, Rob. I would actually encourage you to dig into that. You did a great column looking at the Bastia caucus and the sort of the numbers on the ground. I love that column. I read it. Was very appreciative of the work you did on that. This would be right for that kind of work as well.
Okay. Well, I'll see what I can do. Unfortunately, I don't have the budget for public polling. Unfortunately,
Janet. Let me ask Janet. Oh, go ahead, Janet.
I was going to say, I know this is very academic and informal, but the Minot Daily News did a poll. They do a daily poll on books should be banned or censored. And last I had checked, over 400 people had taken it, and 78% said no. So there's something.
Janet, I did have a follow-up for you. I'm wondering, when we're talking about constituencies for these kind of bills, I'm wondering how specific the impressions are of people that want this. Because to Rob's point, if you said, hey, we have a grade school library and I've just found out what Game of Thrones is about and we have that in there, and a parent says, hey, what in the world? Why'd you put this here? I think all of us have expressed here sympathy or, just agreement with the idea, like there's certain content that belongs in a grade school, even high school, and there's certain content
there's a difference between curation and censorship.
And when those local legislators are campaigning locally, is that what they're saying? Is the constituency, do they know this is going to restrict brick and mortar commerce in a way that it doesn't online and put local business owners at a disadvantage to online retailers? Do they know it impacts retail beyond taxpayer-funded libraries? Do they know those details? I don't know, and I'm not calling them stupid either. Tracking legislation is hard. It's detailed, and that's why I get obviously I'm got steam coming on my ears too on this, and I want names named and details put in, because when I have people like newly minted Majority Leader Mike LaFleur, who heads the largest Republican caucus we have seen in decades. They've been the majority for a while, but it's the largest we've seen in decades, saying things like, I'm for local control, except, and he also said, if you think this is, because someone in committee asked him if he was for censorship, and he said, well, if you think this is censorship, then yeah, I guess I'm for censorship. Now, he gave caveats to that. There's nuance to it. But when you're the majority leader, when you head up the caucus, when you hold that position of prominence, your words matter. And saying that local control might not matter, that maybe I am for censorship in certain areas as the head of a wing of government, that means something. And I'm wondering if those constituents that are so for small government, that want less taxation in life, that want less regulation in life, I wonder if they know that's the majority leader of the party that they were voting for to put in office.
We had this event yesterday that I can only tell you, what 40 or so people, but my impression is that no, they did not understand this. They didn't understand that we had policies and procedures in place, but they also didn't understand that HB 1205, it doesn't just say in the children's library, it says a public library may not maintain in its inventory books that contain sexual material. So we had conversations about what does this mean? We have a book in our children's library about puberty. We wouldn't be able to have that.
I wonder if you would be able to have the Bible.
Well, and
the Bible also. Yeah, I shouldn't have mentioned Game of Thrones. I should have said a book full of incest, sex, and violence. The Bible could not be.
So the impression I get, and I don't know if Cody, if this is what you get too, but we've used that argument repeatedly. I've had pastors write in and say, this would mean the Bible is not available. But what we hear is, oh, well, that's not what we mean. That's not what we mean.
Oh, okay. Well,
but the bill doesn't clarify that.
Well, it actually is said very clearly, even on the record, have said this is about protecting children, and yet minors aren't really even specifically listed in aspects of these laws as well. And then, and I referenced the culture war issue earlier. When we have legislators quoting scripture on the floor, when we have them then in committee also pointing at some of these things and disagreeing, in an exchange between Representative Van Winkle and one of our librarians that was testifying initially on 1205, in that earlier bill. So it's been changed, but there was a children's book that was given as an example with two male hamsters, sort of adopting a smaller hamster and making a family. And the librarian, said this is a really cute book, and this would be banned by that earlier. And Representative Van Winkle made it very clear, saying, well, you have a different definition of cute than I do, and going even further to say that knowing that that these legislators are also then quoting scripture, etc., that we're also seeing religion influences or a particular religion. I have a religious perspective. I'm guessing Rob, you do, Ben, Janet. I mean, we all probably have that. What is happening here is the government imposing a particular, religious belief is the intent behind some of this as well. It's not just Republican ideology, local control, Democrat ideology. It's going beyond that. It's even going into other areas of the First Amendment that we need to also consider here. And so that concerns me. And it's not just this bill. It's across the spectrum on a variety of these culture war bills.
Well, folks, we're over time, and for that I blame Cody and Ben because they were late. Janet and I were on time. Cody and Ben were late to the end.
You should. That's accurate. That's accurate.
That's accurate. I strive for accuracy in all things. But we're going to end it there. Thank you, Janet, for coming on. Thank you, Cody.
Thanks for having us, Rob.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
Well, that was a very illuminating interview. And Ben, I think the top things I took from it are, one, we just spoke with somebody who's actually involved with this process that I think most of us have never really experienced before, which is the process of, I found some objectionable material at my library. Should it be there? Should it not be there? This isn't can we acknowledge, Ben, first of all, this isn't a problem? I mean, if in Minot there's been 4 requests about content over 8 years.
Not only is it not a problem, there's a system. Sorry, Rob.
There's a system in place to deal
There's a
with
system in place that is working well, and now somebody is coming in and finger wagging at a state government level saying, I know better than you, putting in a ridiculous system in place. The original premise of this was anyone accusing any book of anything bad, that book would get removed. So apparently I could go in to the Fargo Public Library and say, I find the Bible offensive, and you will find no copies of the Holy Bible in Fargo Public Library. That's how the law read.
I could go in and say, I don't think Barack Obama was a very good president, so take all his books out of the library, right?
I think all of Rush Limbaugh's jokes are offensive, so remove all of Rush Limbaugh's books.
Yeah,
no more conservative political books.
Where does it end? And by the way, I don't want to remove Barack Obama's books from the library.
Nope, I don't want to remove any of them.
Right. I don't really want to.
By the way, I don't want to remove Mein Kampf from the library either, because I think it needs to be studied. I obviously do not support anything that's in it. It was written by one of the worst people in human history. But if you ban and censor it, you become part of the problem of erasing history and not studying it.
There are just so many things here to make you scratch your head. The fact that we're so focused on sexual content. I mean, Mein Kampf. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it has any sex in it, right? So I mean, Mein Kampf would fly through.
But probably not.
It's probably one of the most concentrated distillations of fascism you're ever likely to read in one place. But there's no. Yeah. I don't think there's any sex in it. So I guess under these bills, Mein Kampf would be fine.
I went to a private Christian grade school. Grace Lutheran grade school still operates in Fargo, and we had a book about puberty in it that featured pictorial descriptions of naked human bodies and how they change when one hits puberty as instruction for children. So apparently Mike LaFleur and company want to censor books that were deemed available by a small private Christian school in Fargo, North Dakota. I mean, this is beyond ridiculous. And what I find beyond disgusting is that someone like Janet, someone who's worked as a librarian, this isn't a glamorous job or a multimillionaire job. It's someone who wants to do their job, serve the public, serve a lot of, frankly, low-income people that get access to the internet there and are able to apply for jobs there. That is one of the many, many services the library has. Now, this bill wouldn't stop that. But why have we encouraged a culture that is now pointing fingers and saying things like groomer to someone like her, who has never peddled smut, who has never done anything even akin to what is being bandied about loosely and without caution or consideration by these legislators? It's irresponsible, and I think it's beyond bad faith.
I think you're right, and part of what I think floors me about this is that there really is a constituency for this, right? I mean, I think we kind of talk about it, how big government's coming in and doing this stuff to us, but there's a group of people that want this, Ben. And I mean, I think we can have a debate. And you know, we heard Cody talking a little bit about a column I wrote, and what I was trying to lay out was why this is happening in the Republican majority. Because I talked to a lot of Republican lawmakers who quietly, including some who voted for these bills, quietly don't like them, but they're afraid to vote against them because they're afraid that when their local district party, the local district NDGOP where they live, is going to, you know, there's only about 40, 50 people who get in that room to decide who the candidates are. And they're afraid if they vote against this. I use the here. This is maybe a better illustration. In my column, I use the example of District 33, where a former state senator by the name of Jessica Bell was up until this last election. She represented that district. She was a reliably conservative lawmaker, a consequential lawmaker. She was influential in saving Coal Creek Station, which if it had closed would have been economically devastating for that region. She was defeated for her party's endorsement, first at the district convention and then on the June ballot, by the guy who is sponsoring Senate Bill 2360, Keith Boehm.
Oh,
so
that's who we replaced Jessica Bell with.
Right, and so she the reason why she lost, the issue that he campaigned on, was her vote to sustain Governor Doug Burgum's veto of a transgender sports bill, and he campaigned on it, and he won, at the convention where I think it was just a couple hundred people from that district selected the candidate. And then he won on the June primary over Jessica Bell, where I think just a fraction. I think the voter turnout was about 15% in the June election. So what you're having is a Republican Party, the candidates of whom are responding to what I think is probably a very small slice of the larger electorate. But because of the way that the process works, by the time these candidates I don't think there was a Democratic candidate in District 33. So by the time
I don't think there was, and
by
about
the time
10
Keith
years
Bain,
before my time, District 33 was all Democrats.
Right. So District 33's changed some with redistricting too.
But the Beulah district were Democrats within I want to say through the 90s.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. Well, it's a different
It was
world.
A coal miners union.
It's a different world we're living in now. The Democrats lost the coal miners.
Oh yeah, by far.
But I mean that's kind of the problem is. I think the people in the legislature, they're not because the Democrats frankly almost don't exist on the general election ballot. We had 54 legislative races this last cycle that had no Democratic challenger at all.
I can't remember, but it was the most we've had in a very long time because you can't convince people to run because they don't want to spend the time, energy, and money to lose.
So I understand that. This is not me being necessarily critical of Democrats, although there's plenty to be critical of them of, but
it makes sense. That's where you're describing where we're at.
Right. So the problem is who serves in the legislature is not really being selected so much by the general election vote, but by the partisan selection process in the Republican Party. And that process has, in a lot of ways, is being influenced by a very small group of very active and very noisy people who are pushing stuff like this.
And I want to know, you're saying, and you're correct, that there is a constituency for this. Even the bad faith version of this, the point the fingers, and any finger pointer gets enabled and empowered to censor anything they want to.
To be clear, that part of the bill, it was part of the original bill, but it has been amended out. Just to be clear,
it has been amended out, but it was there originally, and if it hadn't been amended out and had been signed by the governor, that would be the law. That is a possibility that could have happened, will no longer happen, but we're not done amending it yet. It can still have amendments and it still needs to be watched. There's that constituency there, but I do go back to, I have a little bit more faith in my fellow North Dakotans in that I'm wondering how many know the details, like we were saying, parsing out the details of this bill, like, hey, something that's age appropriate for schools versus we are going to curb and censor as the government what you can sell in retail, what is available for adults in public libraries. And when I hear, and that's why I asked Cody, because I felt like some of the questions I asked Janet and Cody were unfair because I was asking them almost as if they were the bill sponsors, and they are not. They're actively opposing the bill. But when I hear that there are Republican caucus members that are uncomfortable with this, or they're queasy on the side of it, but some of them are voting for it, or at the very least they're not defeating it, they're not even having the conversation out loud in committee. That's really cute. That's not, it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
That supposedly a small government purporting caucus is purporting this specifically the right-wing brand of big government in your lives. I understand it's a left-wing brand too. I understand that.
Sure.
But that's what they're doing right now. And when I was in the legislature, we'd get Republicans saying to people like me, when are the Democrats going to run somebody good against blank and get them out of office? And we'd always have to turn to them and say, well, that district's 75% Republican voting in most presidential elections. I don't think a Democrat's going to win there. When are you guys going to nominate and run somebody good there? And I think the impetus is as much on them to organize and get somebody who's somewhere in the mainstream. We have a governor who I would probably thinks of himself as being towards the mainstream, or whatever, however you define that party. But I'm not hearing his voice here on bills like these. I'm not hearing, is he staying quiet because he wants to keep the veto pen powder dry? I don't know, but I'm just not seeing any directional leadership. But I am seeing Mike LaFleur say, I guess I'm for censorship under certain areas. I guess I'm for, that's not impressed.
Well, no. And it's a moral panic. I mean, what's going on right now, it's a moral panic, not unlike we saw, video games are going to rot your brains and all that. We see this in politics over the years, right? We see moral panics about music. We see moral panics about video games. Now we're going through, we've had moral panics about books before, right? I mean, the Scopes monkey trial and all that other stuff.
And it all goes back to that 14th century monk who said, if God wanted us to have forks, he would put them at the end of our hands. Because anything new is scary, and we must use the powers that be to stop them. It's a tale as old as time. It's incorrect, but I'm looking for the spine somewhere in the legislature and the Republican caucus to stand up and say, enough of this. We're going to be done with this. And I'm not seeing it.
I'm looking for an appetite among the larger public to say, listen, I don't want Bismarck deciding what my local library can offer. I don't want Bismarck deciding what Barnes & Noble can sell me as a grown adult. Right? I don't want to have to go to an adult bookstore to buy Game of Thrones. Right? I don't want to go to buy Henry James or whatever. Any of these other great works of literature that I enjoy, that millions of Americans enjoy, that thousands of North Dakotans enjoy, and now you're going to make me go to an adult book. I guess that's the other thing. Wouldn't that be something and listen, I don't think it would get to this point. If they try to impose this on retailers, the courts are going to strike it down. That's what I think. And it's going to cost the state of North Dakota a lot of tax dollars to defend it. But imagine if it went through and it was law, and all these people who are opposed to pornography are making George R.R. Martin fans go to actual porn shops to buy his books.
Or, hey, if you want your new edition of the Dark Tower series, when Stephen King comes out with his new book, you got to go to the porn store. I mean, North Dakota would really be quite a family-friendly place to be.
Wouldn't that be something? Like if I just want to buy a Ernest Hemingway book, right? Because, hey, guess what? Yeah. Hemingway put sex in his books, too. Right, and under these bills, you're not even allowed to describe sex in the books. It has to be in a special adult section.
My gosh!
Oh yeah, you didn't know that?
Oh wait! Greek mythology is going to have to go straight to the porn store. I just realized if this bill goes through. Wow,
this is from Senate Bill 2360, as passed by the North Dakota Senate on a 38-9 vote. It's and by the way, 38-9. That means some Republicans did vote against this. Kudos to them, along with Democrats. It said, I quote, "Written descriptions of nude or partially denuded human figures posed or presented in a manner to exploit sex, lust, or perversion for commercial gain." Well, every book that's written is written to be bought. And every book that has a sex scene that's intended to titillate. That's part of it. That's why they're telling it. That's why these books are popular. Sex is a part of life. What are we doing? But yeah, it's in there. You can't even describe sex, Ben.
No, and so no Bible, no Jewish or Christian holy books, and I forgive me, I do not know how many depictions there are in the Quran, but apparently we are going to take all holy books out of our public library space and retail spaces too. You can
go to the porn shop and buy the Bible though, Ben, if you want to buy a Bible under this book.
That makes a lot of sense. I hope they're proud, and I hope everybody who's voting for these and just hopes the other chamber fixes it or the governor vetoes it is very proud of. I want them to look themselves in the mirror and say, is this why I ran for office, so I could hold my nose and vote for crap like this?
I guess. Well,
you've got term limits now. You're limited to 8 years. Do something that counts instead of trying to get reelected.
Well, by the way, I don't think term limits is going to help this problem. By the way,
it ain't.
All right, Ben. I think we're gonna put a pin in it there. We both got pretty exercised about this. We got to go blow off some steam, Ben.
Yes.
As always, I appreciate you coming on, and I don't know. I hope these bills die an inglorious death in the legislature, but we'll see.
I hope they die an inglorious death, and we have future legislative sessions that do not portray our state as having these attitudes to make these kind of national headlines. They're not what we need, and I don't think that's who we are.
Agreed. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll talk again. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.